Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Hebrews
with Kurt Bjorklund.
At the end of Hebrews 5, where we get this warning about not going on to maturity, it says, anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. And this phrase that we really get a picture of here is talking about when it says anyone who lives on milk is still an infant. They're not acquainted with the word or the teaching about righteousness. It has this connotation of being weak, being unskilled as well. And then verse 14, but solid food is for the mature. And this is a word that was used earlier, a very similar word to the word about Jesus who is being perfected. And here it's the mature is basically somebody who is at a point where they are being perfected. And then it says they can discern, basically they're full grown, they are fully mature. They are the ones, and there's another word here used here for mature, who can distinguish between good and evil. But what's interesting to me, it says they've trained themselves. They've put themselves in a place where they have this faculty to distinguish between good and evil. Now, training themselves could here refer in part to more teaching. But there's a tendency, and obviously I love teaching in the church. I love hearing it. I think it's important. I think it is a means to growth. But there's a tendency to think what I need spiritually is I need more information, more teaching. Here when he says trained himself for maturity to discern good and evil, I think that the word picture here isn't so much I train myself by going and getting more teaching, but I train myself through the experience of life, through obedience, through continually seeking God in what is good and evil. And what I'm driving at here is I think ultimately our ability to discern what is of God and what is not of God with real clarity is born out of our consistent obedience over time. This is why that word obedience is used in this text, where we see this idea of obeying or continuing on the way, because it's this idea of basically saying what we need to do is obey so that we learn. Verse 9 says, and once he was made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. Now, notice again, it doesn't say all who learn more about him, but it's obey. And there is this sense in which our discernment, our spiritual maturity is tied very closely to the level of obedience to what we already know. And there is greater spiritual adventure in saying, what if I were to surrender every corner of my life to Jesus Christ today? What would that mean? And as we start living that, the perception actually grows to distinguish between good and evil. It's not just simply more study that gets us there. Now, more study is a good thing. It increases our perception. But if we study and learn and don't obey, I think it actually dulls our perception. Because what happens is we become good at justifying rather than applying. We become good at excusing rather than saying, how do I embrace and follow what it is that God has called me to do? So my question today is, where in your life have you allowed a lack of obedience to become normal, and has that led to an inability to discern what is good and what is evil? And evil here, we use that word as if it means, these things that are somehow really diabolical, but the word that's used here really could almost be translated bad. And the idea isn't that everything that's set against God is diabolical and clearly evil. It's that there's good and there's bad, and the good is what's in alignment with God, and the bad are the things that don't bring human flourishing, and those are the things that we tend toward at times when we aren't living in obedience and clarity in how we follow God. So where have you allowed a lack of cohesion to the things you already know to creep into your life, because it's probably a place where you are no longer discerning what is good and evil.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.